It's another significant milestone in the history of our beautiful native cooperative land, Guyana. The People's Progressive Party Civic is celebrating their second year in office, and this year we are celebrating under the theme, celebrating the PPPC's second year in office, the journey to prosperity for all. I am Marcy Parker, and welcome to this special program. Today we have a distinguished panel, and they will be discussing with us progress made by the PPPC administration. To my immediate right is Miss Sarah Brown, and she is the Member of Parliament, and to her right is Mrs. Valini Curtin Leach, who is an activist. Ladies, welcome to the program. Well, Guyana has had her share with the global COVID-19 pandemic. We've had deaths, we've had hospitalizations, and we've really had our share in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. My question to you as we get the ball rolling on this program today, what is your perspective on the challenges faced in Guyana based on the COVID-19 pandemic, and your perspective on how the government of Guyana handled these challenges? We'll start with Sarah.
For us as a nation, the pandemic would have hit us and really hit us hard. Like the rest of the world, we were faced with a lot of challenges in terms of the initial response, what we would have done to be able to combat these challenges, and as a nation today, how we are coping in terms of moving forward. And since there would have been the vaccination exercise, how we are rebuilding as a nation. And so the challenges were many. We would have had more so the economic challenges, whereby, like the rest of the world, because of the global lockdown, we would have had factories being closed across the world, and that would have affected us because of the stuff we import. We would have seen the cost of living would have been on the rise because of the pandemic, and we would have also seen in terms of for us here, with the lockdown would have forced persons out of jobs. The private sector for some time would have had to close its doors to be able to carry down the numbers. And so it was a challenge for us because at that time too, as a nation, we were also being faced with the floods. And that, coupled with the COVID-19 pandemic, would have really put us in a spot where we would have had to make a lot of interventions as to how we were able to move forward.
Certainly, and every sector was affected. The education sector was affected, the agricultural sector, every sector in our country was affected after the floods and then the pandemic hit. So, Valini, what is your perspective on how the government was able to address those challenges that we faced over those years?
First off, I must say, we as Guyanese, we are a resilient people. And the COVID-19 pandemic only brought that to the forefront. Government's effort in addressing this pandemic was good. I think they would have touched all the right sectors because it was not just one group, but the entire nation, and by extension, the entire world. And given what they were faced with, this is something new, something we all were trying to grapple with. I think they tried their best at handling this pandemic. Thankful for the vaccination exercises, and I can also speak on some of the initiatives, the COVID-19 cash grants, and something that is continuing to happen, especially in the riverine communities. You know, with these, they're actually providing some sort of base, some sort of safety net for residents.
Indeed, I love the fact that you said it was something new. We've never had COVID-19 pandemic. We've had flu and we had diseases that hit us in the past, but with the COVID-19 pandemic, it was new. So it means that government really had to work assiduously to ensure that they put systems in place to cushion the effects of the pandemic and the floods. So the cash grant was certainly a welcomed initiative from this administration, and the farmers were able to get assistance as well. The fishermen were able to get assistance as well. The school children were able to get assistance as well. We had to go virtually, and so being able, the education system coming in there now to be able to help children to still learn, to still be involved in their academics, certainly hard work by the government, and so we must commend them as we celebrate their second year in office. I want to highlight to you, Sarah and Valini, in your estimation, how have the key interventions, I know Valini mentioned the cash grant and so on before, there are other key interventions that the government implemented to cushion the impact of the pandemic on the economy and the livelihoods. For example, the $5 billion budgetary allocation for cash grants, and now the part-time job initiative, disability grants, increasing school grants. How do you think these initiatives have impacted the socio-economic landscape in Guyana? Sarah?
Marcy, you're right in that the world as we know it, it's not the same. We're trying to adopt a new lifestyle. We're trying to adopt to a new world in terms of what the COVID would have left in its wake. And so the interventions by the government, it was timely, and in my view, would have had a significant impact on the socio-economic aspect of what would have been intended to do. And so, for example, the grants you would have pointed out, but not only the grants. As we know, there would have been a rise in prices of mostly everything that would have imported because of problems with shipping, and like I said, closing of factories, building materials, for example, would have went up, and other goods as well. And so the government response, it was very, very good in terms of what we would have done to be able to cushion this. For example, the removal of VAT as well from building materials would have significantly also helped persons who are now hoping to construct their homes. For us, for persons who can be able to afford basic stuff, it might not seem like a lot, but we would have been. And so the PPP, the party, when the COVID would have initially started, we were not in government, we were in opposition at that time. And we were not just in opposition, but also would have just come out of the elections whereby we were fighting to restore democracy to our country. And so in the initial outbreak in the country, we were not in government. And even as a party in opposition, we would have taken a stance, we would have gone ahead and started to sensitize persons, educate persons. We were the first to have volunteers, for example, sew face masks. I myself personally was involved in sewing a face mask distributed to the population, to all persons, so they can be able to at least have access to masks, while the then government was busy using the rigging machinery to stay into government illegally. And so we would have come into government, and we would have, like I would have said on different occasions, we would have had to actually hit the ground running, and not just running, but running at a very fast rate in terms of what we had to do to bring back our country. And so for persons who were already suffering in terms of the intervention for the period where there was nothing done, they would have been falling deeper into the situation they were already in. And so the grants, for example, the 25,000 per household, that was direct transfer into people's pockets. There was removal of VAT, there was reduction of taxes. The last budget had a significant amount of taxes would have been further removed to be able to help in this aspect. And so the grants in itself had a very big impact. And for persons who were, like I said, were able to afford, it might not seem like a lot. But for persons who were already in debts, already suffering, it would have gone a very, very long way in terms of helping. I would have spoken with persons, recipients of the grant, and they would have mentioned how extremely grateful they were. Many would have thanked the government for what they were doing, etc.
You know, it's interesting you would say that, Sarah, because I believe when we look around at some of the key interventions that this administration is making across this country, I can safely say that this government is hearing the cries of the people. And there were quite a lot of hardships, especially when the pandemic hit. And so the government sought to conduct outreaches. And for that alone, I believe Guyana welcomed it, that they were able to go on the ground, because you can't sit in your office and meet the people. They were able to go on the ground, to visit various regions, to understand the hardships that the people were facing, and then being able to address that, for example, the part-time jobs. What are your thoughts, Velini?
First off, the grants cushioned and helped folks to adapt to the new normal, which is this new living with COVID normal. Before I talk about the part-time jobs, I must say the education cash grants will now bring some sort of relief to parents, because you have sufficient money now to take care of the school children, take care of the kids' school needs, as compared to having to go into your own pocket to do that. In terms of the part-time job, it is a welcomed initiative. This is giving persons the opportunity to earn extra income, and with extra income will translate to a better standard of living. So it's a welcomed process. It's a welcome initiative that has been put in place to cushion and to help the citizens of Guyana to bounce back and to be resilient and to move forward with the new normal.
Definitely. And when you look at the various engagements that this administration is having, it's every person being attended to, even the persons living with disabilities. I think that, in my view, is one of the most welcoming highlights for this administration, that even the persons living with disabilities now have a portion, now have their part as well. So it's paying attention to the needs of the people of Guyana and being able to address those needs and help to cushion and really help people really face with the hardships. But for you, Sarah, what would you say of all the interventions that the administration has implemented over the last 2 years? We have the disability grants, the education cash grants, grants for the farmers, flood relief, COVID-19 cash grants, and we can go on and on and on. But in your view, what would you say was the most impactful intervention by this administration?
Great, Marcy. So the only way a government can be able to respond to the needs of the people is by actually being on the ground with the people, listening to the people, finding out from them exactly what are their challenges, and then being able to craft a response to be able to address these challenges. And so I could safely say that the PPP, the government, ministers, the cabinet, the president has been doing that. We have been on the ground. We have been meeting with the people, listening to them. And so the responses are as a direct response to exactly what the people are facing. And so I would say that all of these interventions, they would look at different sectors. They impact different sectors, different persons with different interests. And so all of these grants by themselves are significant and are extremely impactful. For example, the disability grant. Children with disability, it is very difficult because they cannot be able to do what the normal children would be able to do. I won't say normal, but children who don't have disabilities, for example, persons who are permanently disabled, for the parents, it is a challenge because there's the, for example, basic stuff, let's say like Pampers for children. That in itself would be something that you will have to be able to budget for the entire, maybe the entire life of that person. And there was no support whatsoever for persons living with disability. And so apart from that now too, the government would have ensured that persons who are living with illnesses, with other types of illnesses, are also put permanently on the public assistance, the schedule that they would have for distribution. They're permanently put. They wouldn't now have to go before the local board of guardians, which is normally a lengthy process and sometimes frustrating to persons. And so the grant for school children, persons are already recovering from a pandemic. Persons have mortgage to pay. There's persons who are struggling with other expenses, and this grant for school children will definitely go a far way, because $30,000 it's quite a lot of money in terms of our school. I have 2 kids, and so we would know that at the beginning of the new term especially, children expect to have something new to go to school, right? It's something that we as Guyanese look forward to. As a child, we want a new backpack, a new shoes, and so in my view, this money, once it is used for its intended purpose, should be able to, I think, purchase at least everything that the child would need, the basic stuff for them to be able to return to school in the new term. And I know in the last year, the last phase of the grant, this would have been also extended to persons, children who are attending private schools. And so that really shows how our government responds. It's not just our programs, our policies. It's not just for, let's say, it's across the board. Regardless of who you voted for, your religion, your race, our party looks at us, all of us, as one Guyana, as His Excellency would say, it's one Guyana. And, you know, parents, we as parents, for those of us who have children, we know that we always want the best for our child. Sometimes we think that the private school is the best. It might not be the best in always. The public schools also have a very good curriculum, delivery, etc. Because I would have been to a public school, it's good. Very good. But parents would always want the best for their child. Sometimes parents think that they want to send their children to private school, and to do that, sometimes they use the last of their savings just to ensure that the child goes to a private school, because in their view, that's the best. That's their view. And so this money can be able to also help towards the tuition fees, the school fee, as we normally would say, for these children. And so, like I said, all of the grants are very important. It impacts positively on the different sectors. The fishermen would have suffered. The grant for them, it goes so far away. There is the grant for hinterland and riverine communities, which at this time too is not extended to the coastline. We cannot be able to understand, because the farther you go, the more expensive the goods become. And I would have said that I would have been to areas like Region 8, and a gallon of gas, as you would normally say, a gallon of gas in as far as maybe Koh Phangan would be as much as $2,500 for a gallon. And so the farther you go from the city, it's the more expensive the goods become. And so the grants for hinterland as well, at this time, it will be very impactful on the lives of the recipients.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that perspective and some of the highlights for me based on what you've just elaborated on. At first, we heard that it was a one-off cash grant of $100,000 for persons living with disabilities, but now it's disability grant for life. Yeah. So that's a major highlight, I would say, for this administration. And our Honorable Minister of Education, Priya Manikchand, she herself being a parent, she understands the challenges parents face in getting their children educated. And so the grants will definitely help to ease the burden of parents as well. The uniform grant and then the hot meals at school and so on, that will definitely help parents and give them an ease so the children can comfortably attend school. We had quite a lot of interventions though, in the education sector, Velini, so that the children could go back to face-to-face learning. We had the pediatric vaccines that was acquired by the government. We also have the grants that Sarah mentioned. What is your perspective about all the interventions that have been made specifically in the education sector? How do you think this will impact the education sector?
The efforts to make learning as comfortable and accommodating, I must say, by the minister and her ministry is pretty good. In terms of returning to school after COVID, it takes a lot of adjusting after being at home for nearly 2 years. And the systems put in place by the ministry is now hugging the child or embracing the children to say, well, we would have gone through a hard last 2 years fighting this unknown disease, virus, and now you're returning. We are here to guide. We are here to help. We are here to hold your hand. We are here to make it better so that you will be able to learn in a comfortable, caring, loving, and nurturing environment. And I think that is what is being provided.
Continuing in the education sector, recently we also learned that the government is making it possible for CPCE teachers who want to be trained to do so online. So the intake obviously will be larger as compared to previously when you had to be enrolled at perhaps the Linden Center, the Essequibo Center, the center at Turkine. And that can only cater for a certain number of participants at one time. But now with the CPCE curriculum going online, it means that more teachers will be trained. What is your perspective about this particular intervention? Sarah and then Velini.
Yes, so I think it's a commendable intervention. Being also a trained teacher myself, and more so coming from the hinterland, living in the dorm, and also would have attended CPCE for 2 years. I can safely say that it is indeed challenging. For me, at that time I was very young, but there are parents who would have to leave their children to travel to Georgetown to acquire a trained teacher certificate. And so the good of this initiative is that persons can be able to stay in their villages and be able to access the online training, something that was never done before. And so this initiative too will allow for more trained teachers to be within the school system, thus uplifting the education sector. And so when we look at this, we look at how we can be able to build from where we were in the pandemic, from face-to-face to actually now go to online. And so it's a very, very commendable initiative. And I know that teachers will make use of it and also be able to upgrade themselves.
Yeah, and it's not just only about parents having to leave their offspring behind to travel distances to attend. Some persons were not even able to come from where they were to attend any of the centers that we had previously, but now with it being online, I think the education system will definitely be boosted with more teachers.
That's true, Marcy. And two, we have, especially from the Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs in collaboration with the Office of the Prime Minister, there is also the initiative by our government whereby in the hinterland we are ensuring that every single community has an internet hub which will be furnished also with computers, internet, so persons, teachers especially, can be able to access the internet free. And these computer hubs will also be outfitted with solar panels to ensure that there is that flow of electricity, whether it's there isn't any power source in terms of a grid where they can be able to access. And so that works also hand in hand with what the ministry is trying to achieve in terms of online learning.
Yes, and that brings me back to the theme under which we are celebrating the journey to prosperity for all. Valini, if I should bring you in at this time regarding the online program that the CPCE is now offering, how do you think this will benefit the education sector in our country?
Most definitely, it will be a boost to the sector. Like the other countries across the world, we are gearing up to move into the digital era. And it is heartwarming to know that a teacher can be at Sibai or Arukamai or Waikaribi and is able to access her classes instead of having to make that trek, that long trek to come to the city where she would have to first go through a period of familiarization and all of that, when she can just be there with her family and have access to learning. Also, we will have a sharp increase in trained teachers, and that will be a boost for the system because the teachers will now use what they have learned and put into practice what they were trained for, which will translate to better performance and better children. Better children translates to better adults and a better Guyana.
Certainly a better Guyana. If you now joined us, we are speaking with Ms. Valini Curtin-Litch, who's an activist, and Ms. Sarah Brown, a member of parliament, and we're having a fruitful discussion on the People's Progressive Party's second year in office. We're celebrating the second anniversary under the theme, celebrating the PPPC's second year in office, the journey to prosperity for all. And indeed, the PPPC administration has confronted all the challenges head on and right away hit the ground running. When you look at the infrastructure that we are receiving, can't wait for the new Demerara Harbor Bridge, but when you look at the roads that are being done across Guyana, you look at the Eccles to Mandela, you look at the Ogle to Eccles contract that was recently signed, we can see massive development already in the pipeline. You look at the MV Militia that will be here by October, November, that will really help Region 1, and all the other developments that we're seeing across Guyana, all these projects certainly to benefit all Guyanese, as our theme says, the journey to prosperity for all. So we can sit here and talk all day about the progress and about all the interventions. But I really want to take this opportunity for thanking you for being on this program, to thank you for being on this program today, to share your perspective on the government's 2-year in office, and I continue to wish you the very best. Thank you once again. We've been talking with Member of Parliament Sarah Brown and an activist here in our country, Valini Curtin-Litch, and we've been reflecting on the PPPC administration, their 2-year in office, as we celebrate another significant milestone in the history of our country. I am Marcy Parker, saying congratulations to this administration as we continue to celebrate under the theme, celebrating the PPPC's second year in office, the journey to prosperity for all. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.